Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We got a packed but fun show for you today. We're in the World Series spirit as Game 1 gets ready to kick off tonight. The Dodgers and Blue Jays going to face off in the best-of-7 series. Our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera is going to join us, and we're going to talk about a couple things. Everything from the impact that immigrants have on Major League Baseball all the way to some of the dealings that the Dodgers owner, one of the teams in the World Series this year, has, and his ties to immigration enforcement authorities. So we're going to take a look at that in just a little bit. But first, we wanted to start with, as always, the headlines. So here's what's trending across the border right now. Starting with 2 Chicago public school students were detained and allegedly assaulted by federal agents on their way to school Thursday morning. The students were reportedly on their way to school when they passed the situation unfolding and stopped to watch and participate in a protest. Witnesses said that agents deployed tear gas on the crowd and assaulted and arrested the students. School officials say the students are U.S. citizens and were later released. A group of Senate Democrats sent a letter today to Education Secretary Linda McMahon, demanding that the Trump administration make efforts to ensure ICE officers don't conduct operations close to schools. According to our partners at The Hill, the letter was signed by 8 lawmakers who say ICE has increased its presence around Chicago public schools and other educational institutions, which, quote, disrupts learning and school operations, end quote. The Hill has reached out to the Education Department for comment, and we will bring you that comment as soon as we get that back from our partners up at The Hill. In other news, on Thursday, President Donald Trump was joined by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Attorney General Pam Bondi to celebrate his recent creation of a new federal task force. Trump said the task force has made historic achievements since it was created last month and has arrested thousands of cartel members.
And we're here today to discuss a sweeping, unprecedented, and historically successful operation that my administration has carried out in recent weeks to arrest, prosecute, and permanently remove members of foreign drug cartels from American soil.
The president said he will brief Congress on the U.S. strikes on alleged drug vessels, but he doesn't believe the administration needs a formal declaration of war. He said, quote, "We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead," end quote. Cartels, drug dealers, and immigrants are what the U.S. Coast Guard is now hoping to deter down here in the Rio Grande Valley. It's part of their newest mission. As we first told you here on Border Report Live earlier this week, Operation Riverwall is intended to be a long-term initiative to stop border crime along the Rio Grande. Jorge Vela from our station KVEO TV has the story.
Operation Riverwall is in full force. Boat after boat cuts through the waters of the Rio Grande, a show of federal authority on this front line. The mission to deter, disrupt, and defend against illegal activity along the border.
The threat out here is evolving, and it's always changing. Our adversaries are using new techniques, new procedures, new technology. So to combat that, we're surging forces onto the Rio Grande to provide more presence so we can deter that illegal activity.
The operation stretches across all 260 miles of the Rio Grande Valley. Massive deployment of resources in coordination with Border Patrol, Air and Marine Operations, the Department of War, and Texas Military Forces. In the first 12 days, the Coast Guard reports 20 apprehensions.
In one instance, we received a call that there was a potential illegal crossing in one area. Our boats responded to that area and were able to see where the illegal immigration worked their way up the bank, and we caught the very tail end of it. So we blocked off their ability to return to Mexico and called in Border Patrol so that the agents could apprehend the individuals which were there at that point on land.
Cumberland says for now, they're focused on learning the layout and the challenges of the river itself.
A little bit of the Texas heat, but in general, the river conditions are very different. They're always changing. The river level goes down. What could be good water one day could be bad the next. So a challenging environment is probably the biggest thing.
When the operation was announced, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem called it a long-term mission. and the Coast Guard plans to stay until the job is done.
So Upriver Wall is going to be an enduring mission where the Coast Guard is here until we gain 100% control of the southern border.
That was Jorge Vela from KVEO reporting. Captain Cumberland also confirmed that they are in constant communication with Mexican authorities, sharing intelligence, on both sides of the border. Stay with us because coming up after the break, our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera is here. We're going to talk a whole lot of different things related to today's big day, the Game 1 of this year's World Series. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles. I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. So the World Series is getting underway tonight. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers with Toronto Blue Jays, and they're going to face off in this best-of-7 series. Now, this game features a team based in the United States and another from Canada, each team located on one of the borders of this country. So we decided to take a look at about how many Major League Baseball players are from countries outside of the United States. Now, I took the liberty of gathering that data and putting together a little map for us. And these statistics are from last year. So Major League Baseball said that in 2024, there were 264 players representing 9 different countries and territories outside of the U.S. on opening day rosters and inactive lists. So in that deep dark red you see there, obviously the United States, about 1,100 players, I think it was when I took a look at those numbers. But let's look at the other countries that you see with the different colors there. Green being the least amount of players from that from these countries, and as you get into the deeper red, as I mentioned, the United States, that means more players from that country. So you kind of get a good look there. So the Dominican Republic leads the major leagues with players from others than the U.S. with 108 players. Taking a look at second place, that's for Venezuela. They have 58 players, and Cuba places third with 18 players coming from that country. Rounding out the top countries are Puerto Rico with 17, Canada with 13, and Mexico had 12 players last year. And you know, you're probably wondering those green countries. Australia, it's a little bit of a lighter green. They have 2 players representing them. Brazil there, they've got a player. Even South Africa, that you can kind of see at the bottom of the African continent there, that green, they have a player coming from South Africa too. So it's not just these Latin American countries that are being represented. There's countries from all over the world playing in Major League Baseball right now. Now, for the 4th consecutive season, the Astros have the most internationally born players with a total of 16 players on their roster. No doubt the most popular international player for the Houston team, Jose Altuve, who's from Puerto Caballo, Venezuela, followed by Jordan Alvarez, who is from Las Tunas, Cuba. Taking a look at another story, the Trump administration's immigration policy didn't skip the game of baseball. So earlier this year, the Major League Baseball Players Association, the union that represents all the players in the league, urged all foreign-born players to start carrying their documentation wherever they go. Now, the executive director of the group said they told the players they had immigration lawyers also ready on staff to help support any issues that may come across for them and their families. And, you know, speaking of immigration action, take a look at this next story. If you haven't heard, this summer, the Los Angeles Dodgers were at the center of a federal immigration raid. On June 19th, the organization asked federal immigration agents to leave Dodger Stadium grounds after agents arrived at the parking lot of Chavez Ravine. Dozens of federal agents with their faces covered up drove up in SUVs and cargo vans. A group of protesters carrying signs against U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement started amassing shortly thereafter. Now, the Dodgers posted on X, the social media website formerly known as Twitter, saying, quote, ICE agents came to pardon me there, saying, quote, ICE agents came to Dodger Stadium and requested permission to access the parking lots. They were denied entry to the grounds by the organization, end quote. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement posted on X that its agents were never there, although helicopter TV cameras captured agents in the parking lot. And now it's time to bring in our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, because, Salvador, you have some interesting reporting on two things, but let's start with one of the players that's from near your area of coverage out there in San Diego.
Yes, we're talking about Alejandro Kirk, who is from Tijuana, but I did want to mention the story up in LA with the Dodgers. This happened because the ICE agents had actually been parking in the parking lot for several days. The fans, people started complaining, and that's when the Dodgers finally took action, telling the ICE agents they could not access the parking lots at Dodger Stadium anymore. So I wanted to clarify that. Now, back to Alejandro Kirk, who is more famous because of the way he looks. He measures about 5'7" and weighs about 240 pounds, but he is an all-star. He is a fantastic player. This year he hit 282, 15 home runs with 76 RBIs. He is an all-star and has been for the last couple of years. The story of how he came to the major leagues is pretty impressive. When scouts were looking at him, they all focused on how tall he was, how heavy he was. He just did not have the look of a professional athlete. So a scout finally went to Tijuana to scout another catcher. And as he watched games and practices, he kept focusing on this little guy, this chubby guy who kept doing everything right. He threw better, he hit better, ran the bases better, had more baseball acumen than the kid he was scouting. So he went back to Toronto and told the Blue Jays staff, we need to select this guy. We need to draft him and give him a chance. Everybody was skeptical because of the way he looks. But finally, the scout convinced him to offer Alejandro Kirk's people $30,000 and drafted him. Most of that money was kept by the Tijuana Toros, who owned the territorial rights to Alejandro Kirk. Alejandro got about $7,000 of that $30,000 bonus that he was supposed to receive. Now, fast forward several years, he goes through the minor leagues and becomes an all-star. And now he is the pride of a lot of people on both sides of the border. Alejandro Kirk, who will be very much in action over the next few days against the Dodgers. He bats cleanup for the Blue Jays. Again, he is a very good player.
You know, I was going to ask you, and you kind of mentioned it, you know, he's from Tijuana, but, you know, like if you live or know anything about the border, for example, my family's from Brownsville, Matamoros area, but, and that's how I tell people, you know, my mom, my dad, they're from Brownsville, Matamoros. And so when I say that, it kind of just goes to show, you know, how binational the folks that like you and me who live on the border are. I mean, we talk about this with Julian a lot too. You know, it's not just, you know, people going over for tourism or to get a bite to eat or to get cheaper medicine. It's family, friends, just going to say hi, stopping by Abuela's house to, you know, have Sunday lunch with her after mass. And so is he, you know, considered like a hometown hero, even though he's from the other side of the border?
He's definitely considered that because, you know, a lot of us, myself included, and I'm not putting myself in that elite category of baseball players because I was never that good. But other players like Adrian Gonzalez, he lived in Chula Vista. We all migrated back and forth and played baseball, not only in the San Diego area, but we went into Tijuana, Rosarito, and Ensenada to be able to play baseball year round. And he fits into that mold. He's one of these baseball, Tijuana border, San Diego culture guys who grew up playing ball on both sides of the border.
You know, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned the binational games there because I did not grow up on this border. I actually grew up near the northern border. I grew born and raised in Michigan. My father worked for the auto industry for nearly 4 decades before his shop closed down during the economic downturn in 2008. And one of the things that we always used to do, and it kind of blew my mind when I would talk to other folks, is I was a competitive swimmer pretty much my entire life growing up. And I mean, it was just common that, hey, we need to head to Detroit, stay the night, because in the morning we got to cross over into Windsor, Canada to go swim over there for a competition this weekend. And, you know, it just kind of goes to show that, like, sports kind of transcends everything. And we see that down here in Brownsville a lot too. We see a lot of these soccer players that go that are part of the Brownsville school districts. You know, they make their way over the border at 4 a.m. And you said you were kind of doing a little bit of that too. You know, how difficult is that as a young man? You know, you just want to sleep most of the day.
Sure. Well, back then, in all honesty, it was a lot easier because the border waits were not as long.
Mm-hmm.
These days, you're talking 2, 3 hour waits. So it keeps a lot of young men and women from going down there to play baseball, soccer, softball, and many other sports and activities like ballet folklorico, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So that the border waits has become an impediment to a certain extent to keep people from being active, from enjoying activities and sports and other extracurricular activities. But it goes on. In spite of all these obstacles, young people want to remain active because they're simply doing something they really, truly love.
You know, and I just want to kind of go back to Alexander Kirk because we were talking about, you know, his stature, right? It's not really what you would consider the traditional athlete. But the one thing I always talk about is I feel like baseball is the common man's sport. And that's why it's such an incredible sport. And that's why, you know, it's not just America's pastime. If anywhere from Mexico to Cuba to Venezuela, all the way to Tokyo, Japan. I mean, I've been to Tokyo several times in the past over my career. And I just think about, you know, I feel like you can't drive 2 miles through the Tokyo region without seeing a minor league or a major or professional baseball stadium there. So it kind of just goes to show how this sport truly transcends, you know, the typical what you would consider athlete. You know, they're not built like wide receivers, all these guys. You know, if you can sling a ball fast or if you can get in front of the ball and, you know the fundamentals, you really do have a shot. I think, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I think baseball is actually like one of the sports that you have the highest opportunity to go, whether it be professional or semi-professional as you kind of climb up the ladder. So very interesting stuff. And we obviously wish Alexander Kirk a little luck for all our San Diego, Tijuana viewers out there. You know, that's on the Toronto Blue Jays side, Salvador. But I want to talk about some interesting reporting that you have about the Dodgers and specifically the Los Angeles Dodgers owner. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he is a very rich man. He not only owns the Dodgers, he owns the Lakers, the LA Sparks, which is a WNBA team in Los Angeles. He owns several other franchises, including a couple of professional soccer teams in Europe, including Chelsea, which is one of the better teams in the English Premier League.
Yeah.
But some of his investments have been questioned in recent months because of the involvement in the immigration front. He owns GEO Group, and this company owns a ton of detention facilities around the country, private detention facilities across the nation that house primarily immigrants. For example, in California, he has 6, in Arizona, 2 in New Mexico, and 11 in Texas. He also has properties in Florida and Louisiana and many other states across the country, facilities that house primarily migrants who have been detained. Now, there's also controversy because he also owns a company called TW Global. And this is a company that has been hired by the federal government to do a lot of data analytics, to capture a lot of information related to migrants. They can track the movements of migrants. And this has led to the detention and deportation of migrants. So Mr. Walter is sort of a controversial figure because his companies are not only helping round up immigrants, house them, detain them, but also deport them.
You know, it's interesting too because as we kind of mentioned and we talked about at the top of this segment is, you know, when ICE showed up to Dodger property, they were told or asked to leave. And so, you know, what's the kind of theme there as in, you know, one hand saying, you know, we support our players, we support our fans, but then on the other hand, kind of, you know, investing in these companies that are deporting a lot of potential fans, potential, you know, who knows, maybe you're deporting a young child who could be, you know, the next, you know, Jose Altuve or, you know, or Alexander Kirk in this situation.
Well, he is a businessman first and foremost, and he will say that these are just some of the companies that he owns, and that's what they are in business for, and they are there to make money. Man, he will say, I also own the Dodgers, and we do a lot of philanthropic work. We donate a lot of money to charity, to organizations, so we do help out the community. We're not just about what we do, what are some of our companies might be doing. So that's one way that the Dodger brass is sort of defending what Mr. Walters' companies have been doing and what are doing right now. But you are absolutely right. You never know who they might be deporting or detaining because it could be the next Lionel Messi or could be the next Shohei Ohtani.
Mhm.
So we don't know what's going to happen, but this is sort of the fact of life. And it's kind of a dichotomy there in Los Angeles because Los Angeles, if you're familiar with it, it is very heavily Latino. A lot of Mexican Americans, people of Mexican descent, live there, work there, study there. So it's a market that is heavily pro-Mexican, pro-Mexico, and but at the same time, so the Dodgers have to balance this out. How do we appease a large base of our fans and then justify what we're trying to do in other areas of our business? So this is a difficult situation for Mr. Walter and the Dodgers, but as they say, winning cures it all.
And you brought up such an important point there. Like if you walk around the Rio Grande Valley today, I've seen probably 5 or 6 Dodger hats this morning alone, and it truly feels like the Dodgers are just one of those teams that the Latino community really rallies around. Down here, obviously, we have a lot of Astros fans, not that many Rangers fans. They're peppered throughout the area, but a lot of Astros fans. But again, the Dodgers just kind of seem to be the team for a lot of Latino folks across the country and across South America as well. Now, I do have to ask you this, Salvador. You're from San Diego. Are you a Padres fan? And no,
Yes. I thought you go ahead. I'll finish asking the question. I kind of knew where you were headed.
Well, I just got to know, who are you cheering for these next 7 games?
Well, I am a huge San Diego Padres fan. I grew up here, and the Dodgers have always been our nemesis. So there's no way I'm rooting for them. So I will be hoping that the Blue Jays win the World Series.
Well, I think I've told you this before, but I went to San Diego for the first time last year and absolutely fell in love. Every time I talk about it, my wife gets nervous because I say we should move out there someday. But the first thing that we did when we arrived is we went to a Padres game, and I got to say, I've added the Padres to my collection of favorite teams to watch. So I will also be rooting for the Blue Jays this time around. So anyway, well, thank you so much for joining me today, Salvador. We really appreciate it. Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent. We got a little more to talk about when we come back after the break, so stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. Before we get to one last story, we wanted to talk about staying on the theme of baseball. We did want to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a weekly show tracking the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break down who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on data. I had the privilege of getting to work behind the scenes on this week's episode, which is focused on all things Proposition 50, as well as the governor's race in California. Big deal when it comes to the future of what could happen as far as redistricting after the state of Texas here did it or was working towards it, and then California and some other states now on the East Coast are trying to join in this fight on both sides of the aisle. So make sure to check that out, Political Power Ranker. You can find more on it at abc27.com or your local Nextstar station's website. Also wanted to remind you that you can stay informed on the story shaping the U.S.-Mexico border while on your commute, maybe working out at the gym or taking the dog out for a walk, as Border Report Live brings you real-time updates, expert insights, and voices from both sides of the border. You can find us at Border Report Live on Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, your Spotify app, as well as YouTube. So make sure to like, subscribe, and take a listen to one of our previous episodes or today's episode if you enjoyed me and Sal talking baseball today for more information on that. Before we go, we did have one last story to tell you about this afternoon, and that is no doubt the greatest name in Dodgers history is Fernando Valenzuela. The Mexican-born superstar from Sonora played Major League Baseball for 17 years. He played for a number of teams, but was most well-known as a pitcher with the Dodgers. He was signed in 1979 and made his debut back shortly thereafter in 1980. He won his first 8 starts, and that was the beginning of the so-called Fernando Mania. He won the National League Cy Young Award and Rookie of the Year in 1981. And after retiring, his baseball career did not stop there. He ended up serving as Dodgers broadcaster until 2024, the year he passed away at the age of 63. The Dodgers retired his number 34, and players now wear that patch on their uniforms as a tribute. And that is a look at what's happening today across the border. We appreciate you so much for being here this afternoon, as always. For our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, my name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. Have a great weekend.